Let's bring in our panel. Kurt Bardella, Democratic strategist and NewsNation political contributor, and Malik Abdul, Republican strategist and radio talk show host. Gentlemen,
Morning
good
in America
to see.
reunion right here.
Yes, from a year ago. I love this. These are the two men that started with me on my show on the weekends. Thanks for joining us, guys. Malik, I will start with you. What do you make of Trump's calculation? Is the Republican House majority in trouble here?
Of course it is. This is one of the concerns even Speaker Johnson had talked about as Donald Trump was pulling people from the cabinet. Now, keep in mind, in this last Congress, Republicans already had a very slim majority. Now we have an even slimmer majority. So when you have people talking about this, and I think that Donald Trump, in his effort, and I think he was warranted, Donald Trump had a lot of people in his first term that he didn't have relationships with. So Donald Trump wanted a lot of people that he wanted people he could trust. And I think any administration would want people whom they could trust. The question is whether or not you should have pulled from Congress itself. And so I think right now we're seeing that in Congress, and whether or not this special election in Florida, I think of a race in Florida, whether or not that actually goes in the opposite direction, we don't know. But Donald Trump sees this as an issue, and that's why he pulls Stefanik's name.
Kurt, I want to ask you about a race in Pennsylvania also making headlines. Democrat James Malone won a special election in Pennsylvania state Senate race. Let's take a listen to what Hakeem Jeffries had to say about this earlier.
Early, Republicans are on the run. They're on the run. We saw it in Iowa in January. We saw it in New York in February. We just saw it in Pennsylvania yesterday, in places where Republicans should not simply be winning, but winning easily.
And just a reminder to our audience, this is the same district that President Trump won by 15 points during the election. Kurt, is there anything Democrats are doing right now that you think is working in their favor?
Well, I think the one thing that we have seen, and this has really been true going even back to the president's first term, when Donald Trump is not on the ballot, Republican turnout goes just down a cliff, while Democrat turnout maintains its steady pace. And that's why there was such a flip in 2018 with the midterms. We saw Republicans underperform in the midterms in 2022 when everyone predicted a massive Republican big red wave coming, and it was nothing more than a red ripple. And here we're seeing in these special elections the same trend carry over from years past. If Donald Trump isn't at the top of the ticket, the Republican base is not as motivated to turn out to vote. They are not as tuned in to these special elections. It is a bellwether for what we can see in the November midterms of next year. It's something that Democrats are counting on, that even if they don't have their act fully together, even if they don't have a national strategy, a national message, in these individual districts, and remember, you vote for your congressman, you vote for your district, you don't vote for the national politics. That's always the case with constituencies. The Democrats are banking on that trend carrying through, and I've seen nothing to suggest that that's not going to be the case.
Malik, another race. Trump is speaking at a rally virtually tonight in Florida. It's for Mike Waltz's old congressional seat. This race has gotten a lot tighter than people expected between Republican Randy Fine and Josh Weil. Do you think Republicans will be able to hold on to this seat?
From what I'm hearing, the guy, Ralph Fine, he doesn't seem like the greatest candidate. But to piggyback off of what Kirk said, I think he's right, but I think he goes further than just Donald Trump. We saw when Barack Obama was in office, by the time the midterms came around in 2010, and even in his 2012 election, you saw those numbers start to decrease. And I think what we're seeing with what the Republican Party is experiencing is a similar thing that the Democratic Party experienced, in that many people were galvanized because Barack Obama or because of Donald Trump, not necessarily because of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. So you have many people in this I'll say on the right, who are much more supportive of Donald Trump than they are the Republican Party. And it could spell a problem down in Florida, because again, people have said that this guy, I'm not familiar with him, but people are saying that this guy is just not the greatest candidate. And so the Republican Party, not the campaign or the White House, the Republican Party is going to have to figure out, how do you get out the vote? Because it seems as if Democrats are much better at that at this point.
All right,
yeah, that's a good point. I just want to jump in and add this one thing. Malik is right. The problem and challenge for Republicans is that they no longer have a boogeyman to run against. Joe Biden's not there. Barack Obama's not there. Kamala Harris isn't there. Nancy Pelosi isn't there. They've spent the better part of the last 2 decades running against those figures as well as the Clintons. And right now, the Democratic Party doesn't have a national figure that you can ascribe the party to. Republicans do in Donald Trump, and that's actually hurting their candidates in these special elections.
All right, let's pivot to tariffs. Kurt, I'm going to stick with you on this. Trump is planning that 25% tariffs on all foreign cars coming into this country. There's an analysis by the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. It shows cities most vulnerable in this trade war with Canada are mostly states Trump won in November, like Detroit, like San Antonio. How much of a political gamble do you think Trump is making with these tariffs, especially in states that are mostly red?
Yeah, you want to give your voters a reason either not to show up or turn against you. It's doing stuff like this over and over again, hurting voters in Texas, Michigan, Ohio, Missouri, Pennsylvania, anywhere near the border of Maine. That's going to be an economic problem. And it's the one issue that Republicans seem so reticent to try to talk about right now is the economy and inflation. Their line is, well, give it time, and it'll work. It's going to be tough for a few minutes, but it'll ultimately get better. Let me tell you something. If it doesn't get better by the end of the summer, Republicans are doomed in the midterms.
Malik, I want to ask you about Republican Congressman Don Bacon. This is what he said in Congress, quote, "Made a mistake. We passed legislation that gave the president some temporary tariff authorities. I think we should look back and maybe restore the power back from Congress and take away the authorizations." Do you think Trump is risking his support within his own party in Congress when it comes to these tariffs?
Within his party, absolutely not. I do believe, though, when it comes to the American people, and again, to piggyback, I mean, Kurt and I, we're going to be in agreement on this. To piggyback off what he was saying, is that you have to consider, let's say that the Republican Party gets its wish and you have tens of thousands of federal government employees who have been fired from their jobs. So they go into the summer, they're not able to vacation, or they may not even have a job, because just because you have a job in the federal sector doesn't mean that you're going to automatically get a job in the private sector. So when they say that we're going to bring manufacturing jobs back, well, those project managers, those scientists, those doctors, all of these people, they have no interest in going working at a manufacturing plant. And so if you get into the summer and at the end of the summer, people aren't able to afford to, pay for their kids to go back to school supplies and all of this type of stuff. Who knows what may be happening at the economy? Gas prices may be up. Who knows what may be happening when you go into the register? All of these things will factor into how people feel. So I get that some people, like a Howard Lutnick says, well, my mom may be able to, she won't, shrug, if you will, if she misses a Social Security check. Well, that's not the case for over 90% of Americans.
Yeah.
And if people start feeling this, they're going to respond, and they're going to end up responding at the polls.
Kurt Bardella, Malik Abdul, I'll text you guys tomorrow morning so we can wear the same outfit again, so we can match. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks for having us.